Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. Welcome to the Based on Actual Events podcast where we talk all about movies, films, and cinema. This is actually Ben, and I love movies. Welcome back, everybody, to third episode of the Based on Actual Events podcast. Thank you for coming back again. We obviously didn't have an episode last month, and I'll get a little bit to why that didn't happen, but if you were able to join my live stream on my Instagram in March, that was sort of a way to make up to all of you that I didn't get an episode out last month. I got actually a good amount of viewers. A lot was friends. I talked with a good buddy of mine about some movies. We had some questions. It was actually a lot of fun. I'm thinking about doing it again because I really like that format. Obviously, I know that I don't get like a lot of viewers on the podcasts and the live streams, but for the people that do come and listen, or even just listen to a portion or the beginning, thank you very much. And I'm hoping to continually putting these out consistently every month, but last month was a little tricky because it's been a little tricky for all of us, because basically our whole life has turned into living into a movie, an apocalyptic movie. Obviously, COVID-19 has hit the world, has taken the world by storm, bigger than Beatlemania or Beaver Fever. But yeah, COVID-19 is a serious, all kidding aside, is a very serious virus that's affecting a lot of people and a lot of jobs, livelihoods, and individuals and industries, and film is one of the things that I think is connecting a lot of people. A lot of people are trying to find interesting ways to watch movies together remotely because all the theaters are closed, and I think that's really awesome. So in March, basically my first 2 weeks in March were pretty hectic with school because school was still going on, and then school was shut down for a week, and they were saying whether or not we were going to come back or not. So I just didn't have the equipment for that week because I was gone. And that week turned into the entire term very quickly. And it was just unlikely to get my recording device in March and to get a podcast out, because I was also still doing school remotely through online learning. But finally, I'm done. This is the first day I'm actually done, and I decided one of the first things I wanted to do was to record this podcast, because nothing gets me happier than talking about movies. So that's my little, just everything's obviously been going crazy. Thank you for listening. I'm done school. Hopefully some more content will be coming out. I have one or two ideas cooking for the YouTube. I also kind of want to work on a couple of screenplays I'm working on, and then hopefully get the website out. I know I've been talking about the website since January, but hopefully that will actually come out by sometime in the summer, because I have a lot of time now, because quarantine is hopefully not taking my job permanently, but I get it back, or hopefully. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit about COVID and in relation to the film industry and the theater industry in a little bit, but I think we need to talk about the first thing that everyone is concerned about, which is Tiger King. I know it isn't a movie, but it's taken the world by storm, and it wouldn't be proper if we didn't talk about it. It's not a movie, but it's a docu-series, which I would consider. I know in the intro is, we talk all about movies, films, and cinema, but TV should also be added in there too, because I love television, and television movies are in the same category. I mean, I go to school for film and TV. TV is not lesser than movies at all. So we're going to put TV in there too. So this is a docu-series done by Netflix. And just this isn't, also I don't have any like facts or any research done on this. This is just, I watched the series, and this is just my takes and view on it and how I want to talk about it. But I was hearing so much about this Tiger King thing. People were talking to me, and it's one of those things that just comes up by storm, and everyone's recommending about it. I'm seeing memes about it, and I decided to finally watch it, and it is one of the craziest documentaries I've ever seen, and everyone's talking mainly about Carol Baskin and whether or not she killed her husband. And I actually watched a video just recently of Howard Baskin, which is Carol Baskin's current husband, her third husband, responding to Tiger King, and I want to talk a little bit about that response in a minute. But if you haven't seen Tiger King, go watch it. A lot of spoilers ahead if you haven't. It's basically a docuseries about a guy named Joe Exotic and the big cat industry in America and the selling of large cats like tigers, lions, snow leopards, ligers. And it's just crazy how these people can just buy these large animals in the United States. And, they're passing these laws about having big cats, and it's just crazy to me, not an American citizen, to just, like, I can't just go out and buy a cub for, like, and in the series they name some of the prices, and Joe is selling some of these cubs for $1,000-$2,000, which honestly in the grand scheme of things is not a large sum of money. I mean, it's a lot of money. But compare that to a car, I mean, you obviously have to pay for the food, the water, the consumption, the care for this animal, but it's crazy that you can just buy those kind of animals. So that was my first sort of response to this documentary, and my second response was, oh my god, these documentary filmmakers struck gold when they went down this line with all these insane, crazy characters, starting with Joe Exotic to Carol Baskin, and the fact that she has a missing husband, and she's a suspect in it, and the fact that of Doc Antle's weird wife situation, and Jeff Lowe, and the Hitman, and Alan Glover, and it was a perfect storm for these filmmakers, and I'm sure that everyone right now is super obviously bummed about the whole COVID situation, but there's producers at Netflix that are like just cheering because everyone's stuck at home, and that's exactly when this documentary releases, and now everyone has nothing to do but watch and talk about Tiger King, and because of so much hype, it got another episode, which I haven't actually seen yet. I believe it released on April 12th, and it was kind of like a Where Are They Now? I think it was sort of like more of like a sit-down talk show, sort of something like Talking Dead, or like Talking Breaking Bad or whatever, where they sit them down and they kind of talk about the show and everything and stuff. But I want to talk about Howard Baskin's response to the documentary. And I've read a couple of articles, and he said it in this video, was obviously they're pretty displeased about the documentary. And the documentaries take a really long time. In this case, it took 5 years to shoot and to make. I believe it was a minimum 5 years. It could have been more for editing, but 5 years of filming. And Howard said that when the directors first came to them, they said that they wanted to make the Blackfish of big cats, and Blackfish is probably my favorite documentary ever. It's one of the best documentaries out there. It's a documentary that talks about the abuse and the mistreatment of whales at SeaWorld. And basically, they originally wanted to make this the big cat equivalent to Blackfish, and probably follow the tigers through captivity and what they go through, and accidents that happen, and what you can do to help, which was obviously Carol Baskin's Big Cat Rescue. This obviously changed, this center of focus obviously changes when Joe Exotic, Doc Antle, and other people sort of start falling into place. And the way that I see it is Howard Baskin and Carol Baskin are very upset with the way it went, because they're like, this is not about the cats, this is about Joe Exotic and his life and everything, and they told us that, and they lied to us. And the problem is that people don't understand with documentaries is you have an intent at the beginning. Um, I did a short documentary in school last semester, so the end of 2019, which is obviously wildly different from this. It's not to this scale. We didn't do 5 years of shooting. We did 3 days. Um, but I learned about the documentary process, and basically you can start off with anything. You can start off with wanting this to be the Blackfish of big cat industry. That's totally fine. You can have that written down. This is who we're going to interview. This is how we think it's going to go. But with documentaries, the thing is, you don't actually know how it's going to go. You can script all you want. You can write what you want, but you don't know who you're going to meet down the line. You don't know who's going to say what stories are going to emerge. Even they said in the first episode, the guy was interviewing a venomous snake trader in Florida when he stumbled across a guy with a snow leopard, and that changed the focus of the documentary. People can say people can say that the directors were lying, and they were out for Carol and Howard, and they were lying to their faces by saying, like, oh, no, don't worry, this is about the cats, not Joe Exotic. But the thing is, as a director, you can't ignore a person if it doesn't fit in your story. I bet when they found Joe Exotic, this mullet wearing, pierced up, handlebar mustache, gay redneck that's shooting guns, that's a showman, and wears these elaborate outfits, and sings these country covers, and holds a revolver at all times. I bet they thought they struck gold right there. If I was a director, I'd be like, holy crap, we got it. Like, this is it. This is our story. This is our character. He's so interesting. And the fact is that his life and everything around his life and all these connected dots is so interesting. You immediately go, this is a story worth telling. And it's tough being a documentary filmmaker because everyone's going to think you're the bad guy. Because they think if you make a documentary, it's like you have to make this, you have to make this statement, you have to make this story like, Food Inc. Or I haven't actually seen Food Inc., but just reading a little bit about it. Or Blackfish, for example. We need to make a statement, which is, Food Inc., which is the mistreatment of animals in the food industry. Blackfish, the mistreatment of animals at SeaWorld, which in Blackfish, the statement is very clear, which is SeaWorld is mistreating these animals, and here's the history of it. You don't always have to make a statement. You don't always have to make a statement. And the thing is, people think you do sometimes. But the ground rules of a documentary is the exact same of a narrative film, which is you need to tell a story and you need to have a main character. In Blackfish, the main character was the whale that had attacked the SeaWorld worker and killed her in the show. And it sort of talked about the life of that whale from being captured out in the wild and taken away from its mother, and going from zoo to zoo to zoo, or aquarium or to aquarium, and the violent tendencies of this whale and the violent tendencies of other whales in captivity. And that was the main character. And the antagonist was SeaWorld. For Tiger King, the focus was probably going to be a cat or some of the cats, or even Carole Baskin. But obviously that shifted when they met Joe Exotic, who is obviously, without a doubt, a better, from just a story point of view, a better main character. You want to tell a story, and you want to tell the most interesting story. And Howard Baskin can say that's copying out and going for the most sensational thing you want, but that's not his or anyone's choice, even if they said that their original intent was, oh, we want to make this the big cat of black, the big cat equivalent of Blackfish, I mean, it changes. Of course, that could be day one, but by year three, and you find out that, Joe's running for governor and that, he could have burned down his own studio and he's in a murder plot, that's obviously, to them, more interesting. And not to say that the other stuff is not interesting and not important, but from the director's standpoint, you have to go with a story that you think is most interesting, and that's the first rule. Is you go for the thing that is most interesting, and you don't apologize for stuff. Like, the thing with documentary is what we're asked to do, or what we're taught, was when you're filming, a person and you're asking questions, ask some easy questions, and then wait for a while till they get comfortable with you, and then you want to get that emotion. You actually like if they, and it's very like bad to say when you're saying it out loud, but if they like start crying or emoting a lot, that's when you have gold, and that's when you have to use it. And the thing is, we are taught that when you're done the interview and you say thank you very much, you call cut, but then you don't cut for 10 minutes. So you leave the camera running for 10 minutes, and you just have a more natural conversation with them when you think the cameras are off. And that's when more interesting stuff starts to come out. And then you say, we can use all the footage, and they say, yeah, that's fine. And then you cut. And then you use it. So documentary can, have a little bit of a dark side way that way. So I think that the directors were totally fine and in their right. I think Howard Baskin, I understand where Howard and Carol Baskin are coming from. Obviously now they're getting a lot of messages about Carol, possibly killing her wife. Killing her husband. Which, is tough. It's tough. I mean, we don't know whether or not she did kill her husband or was a part of his missing case, but, there's a chance that she did. I'm not saying there's not, but there's also a good chance that she didn't. And it's like, how would you feel if someone that you were intimate with went missing and you are now publicly blamed for that? What if your spouse is publicly blamed for a murder? So I can understand where they're coming from. They're getting a lot of heat from the public, and that's not fair to them. So I don't really want to talk about whether or not Carol killed her husband or not. So far, it's up for investigation by the police. But all news is good news sometimes, because obviously from this documentary, Carol Baskin and Howard Baskin's organization is probably overflooded now. I mean, like to be honest, who publicly knew about Carol and Howard on a wide scale before this documentary, and who knew about Joe Exotic on a wide scale before this documentary? Was really no one. Like, I didn't really know about Joe Exotic. I'm sure he was probably big in sort of semi circles in the United States, and so was Carol Baskin. But honestly, no one really knew who Carol Baskin was on a global sense until now. It's now a household name. Like, there's Saturday Night Live parodies, and I'm sure Big Cat Rescue is getting a lot of buzz and a lot of press now, which all press is good press. So that's my little hot take on it. I think it's a great docuseries. Check it out. I really hope it doesn't become... They release that episode, I hope it doesn't become oversaturated and turn into more of like a, how do I put it, like a reality show where all these people who are in Tiger King kind of become aware of their character and how they can make money off of it, because that's usually sometimes what happens is they get so big and they become the character that they were portrayed as, not who they are. So I could really see Jeff Lowe going out there and being this like sleazy cupheader for like social media and selling T-shirts and selling memorabilia, and I could see all of that happening. But who knows? We don't know. yeah, that's my little take on Tiger King. And the next thing that I want to talk about is the future of the film industry, and specifically theater and streaming services. This is an interesting topic to talk about right now because COVID-19 has obviously shut down all films in the process of filming, all TV shows in the process of filming, and has currently shut down all theaters in North America. Well, Canada for sure. I'm not really too sure about the States. They're opening up things, I think. I don't know. But obviously, across Canada, all theaters are closed. And there's this question about what's going to happen with the future of the film industry, and specifically, I want to talk about more about the theater industry because I personally believe that the film industry is just going to boot back up again. Some money will be lost, obviously, but it can be gained back again easily. Because there's always a demand for new shows, new movies coming out, and there's no real other way of filming stuff rather than just going out and filming us some stuff. So I think maybe a couple movies are going to get canceled or switched around because of financial reasons, but it's ultimately the film industry is going to bounce back and be fine. The thing that's more pressing is the theater and festival industry and the streaming services. So the one fear that I've been talking about with a couple people is that Cineplexes, AMC's, a couple of independent theaters are struggling because of loss of ticket sales, popcorn sales, and there's fear that they can go bankrupt because their whole industry relies on large groups of people gathering in one spot, which is the thing that everyone can't do right now. And the thing is, when this starts to boot back up, are people going to want to go to movie theaters again? And it's sort of, there's this fear of large gatherings. It's either going to go one or two ways. It's going to be, I'm really scared to go out with all these people, and then there's also I really want to go out and I want to watch a movie with everybody. So we'll see where that thing lies. I'm sure there's going to be both parties, but you can expect that not everyone's going to be flocking to a Cineplex to sit in a large group of people after a whole pandemic. So there's a loss of money there. There's also the fact that there's economic loss, and movie theaters are no longer cheap, and I'll get into that later. So the best option people are having right now is streaming services like Netflix, Crave, Amazon Prime, and things like that. And there's been a lot of talk of how is it going to go? Is the theater industry going to shut down? And is movies going to become more like an elitist form, like ballet and opera? And here's my kind of take on what's going to happen. And is there a fear? Yeah, I think there's a very valid fear of what can happen in the future. But I think that when this is all done, I think people are going to be excited to go back to the theaters with their friends and their family and have that experience together. And what people are saying is, are you losing anything by watching a movie at home? And I personally think you are losing something, but a lot of people are happy with just waiting and streaming online. Quentin Tarantino in 2016 was telling this exact same thing, that there's not a lot of movies out there that people will rush to the theater day one and line up down the block to go see. Some of these superhero movies, but a lot of the times that people are okay with waiting and watching on a streaming device and not lose any of the value of the movie. I'm more in the camp of Martin Scorsese, where watching a movie together in a theater is like a religious experience. And I think some of this has to do with loss of watching it on a digital projector opposed to a film projector. I think watching it on a film projector is a lot more real, and you're there, or watching it with a packed theater opposed to a white theater. Film becoming more elitist was already happening before COVID-19 even hit. Back in the 60s and 70s, movie tickets were $5. Now, movie tickets are about $15 on any day, and $11 on a cheap day. $15 gets me Netflix for a month, and that gets me almost unlimited movies for a month. Now, to be fair, they're not the current movie in the theaters, but they're movies nonetheless that I would enjoy and that I can watch easily with my friends and, make food and talk during it and not really lose any of the quality of it. In film festivals like Toronto International Film Festival and a lot of these other ones are quite expensive to go to. I spent $60 to $70 on tickets to go to a movie at TIFF, which basically is already in the latest form of art now. And it's kind of hard because movies used to be the working class's art form because you could only pay $5 and go see a movie. And it's going to be tough to see how this thing, rears its ugly head and whether or not, some of these cineplexes is going to close and more of this elitist form where you pay this large amount of money to go and it's more of an event. I, it will be interesting to see where this goes. I personally think that the theaters will be fine, that maybe there will be some closures and shutdowns and some rejigging to maybe prices, hopefully, but we'll see how that goes. Hopefully the theater industry survives because that's an industry I really want to go into. So now that we talked about the depressing stuff of how theater could possibly die, even though I don't think so, but there's a chance, we'll go into some of my favorite 1970s and 1980s horror movies. There you go. Let's dive into it because this is a topic I've been wanting to talk about for a really long time. And I'll talk a little bit about these movies. These are some movies that I think you should watch during your quarantine. And let's just dive into the number one, which is Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which was released in 1973. And I just actually recently watched this movie because I was supposed to go to watch it at TIFF for the first time, for like a 9 o'clock showing, but COVID-19 obviously hit and canceled that, so I watched it at my house, and it's a pretty darn good horror movie. It's not one of my favorites in the sense of this list. I mean, it's one of my all-time favorites over time, but in compared to this one, it's on the lower end of the scale. Just because I thought that the first half of the movie is very slow and slow burning, and you don't see Leatherface until like a good 40 minutes into the movie, which the movie's only an hour 20 long, which is quite a long time, and there's some redundant scenes and stuff like that. But when Leatherface comes out, it's a blast. It's definitely, you should watch it. I don't really have too much else to say about it. I wrote a review about it on my website. Hopefully that'll be up soon. But it's a very good movie with a lot of good symbolism and a lot of good cutting, and the editing is great near the end of the movie, though at the beginning there's some rocky parts in my opinion for the editing, but there's some great Soviet montages in there, and the ending, I think it's one of the most iconic horror endings. Next up on my list is Jaws. Now, Jaws is a movie that I watched a while ago. It was, oh man, how long did I watch that for the first time? I was in high school and I watched it, and I had never really seen the fear of Jaws because, obviously you hear about older horror movies as you're growing up, Jaws being a major blockbuster of one. And the fear is just, why don't you go into the water? And, I think Jaws is more relevant now more than ever, where there's this predominant fear, and then there's people that are like, there's nothing to worry about, we can just go by everything as normal. And they reopen the beaches, and that's when they have the fear of the shark. So it's, risking your life to go hunt this shark to basically get profit, keep going for this island. It's one of my favorite movies. It has one of my favorite shots in it, which is the shot. There's about two shots. One, I don't know if the second one's in pose, but the first one's real, where Quint is smoking a cigarette outside on the boat. It's nighttime, and a shooting star just goes in the distance. It's such a beautiful shot, and it's a natural shooting star. And Jaws just holds a lot of sentimental value to me, especially in that shot. It reminds me of summer and good times, even though it's about a shark killing people. But it's just one of those classic horror movies that holds such a deep meaning to me. And it's fantastic. Next runner up, Halloween, which is, I think, one of the most creepiest slasher films on this list, and I have a couple more coming up, which is Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street. But I think Halloween is probably the creepiest. Just the slow, methodical plotting of Michael Myers throughout the film is just haunting. It's just haunting to see him chase down this young girl throughout this entire movie. And one of the most iconic shots and creepiest shot is when she's walking down the pathway and he's right on the edge of the bushes and she looks back and he's gone. And I think that's terrifying because it's done during the daytime. And just like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which Texas Chainsaw Massacre is set predominantly in the daytime and makes it daytime scary, which is hard to do. And I applaud movies that can do it, like Midsummer, Texas Chainsaw, but Halloween does it really well with a slow, melodical stalking of this silent antagonist. And I think it's done really well. I watched it last Halloween for the first time, and it was really great. And we're just gonna keep on rolling because where are we at? We're about half an hour in. I don't want to make this episode too long. It's a little late right now, and I want to keep this a little bit short. We might be releasing some more stuff later, so we're just gonna talk a little bit more about some stuff, and then we'll get going. So obviously, our guy that we have right now is Jason Voorhees. So we gotta talk about the Friday the 13th series, which I binge watched last summer. I ordered the eight Blu-ray pack, and I binge watched all of them, and then downloaded a couple of the other ones on Apple, and I got interested in the Friday the 13th series because I had last summer become a camp counselor for the first time. Hopefully I can be one again if COVID doesn't destroy the opportunity to again. But yeah, I was a camp counselor for the first time, so I was like, I need to watch Friday the 13th because I'm a camp counselor, and all these movies have these camp counselors, and Friday the 13th is the king of the camp counselor horror. So I watched them all. The first one is probably the best horror because there's great horror elements in it. The second one's pretty good. The third one's probably my favorite because it dons Jason's classic mask. They get really goofy from that point on. Jason Takes Over Manhattan is more Jason Takes Over a Boat. But if you just like goofy exploitation horror movies, just watch it. They're a lot of fun. They're not like cinematic masterpiece, but they're a lot of fun. The number 6, I believe, Jason Lives, where he gets reanimated from the dead, is the worst one. It's just bad from all standards. The fourth one's pretty good. The fifth one, I thought was the best one, actually. One of the best ones, which I don't think a lot of people enjoyed, which was basically 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, 3, and 4, he's just a normal guy who's a serial killer. He's pretty strong. They think he died in 3, but he wakes up in the morgue in 4 and goes on a killing rampage, and then the kid Tommy kills him at the end of 4. And then in 5, Tommy's basically has PTSD from the situation. And the whole movie, Jason's terrorizing them and killing them, but he's wearing a different outfit and different mask. And at the end, it reveals that it wasn't Jason, it was the paramedic at the beginning of the movie that took away a kid that got killed. And it was that kid's dad who had gone on a rampage. And I thought that was such a good twist. I didn't see it coming. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was an interesting way to revamp the series. Because the director was obviously going away of being like, we don't want to keep doing Jason all the time. We can redon the mask, and then at the end of the movie, Tommy was going to take the mask on and become the next killer. And I thought it was a very interesting way to do it and way to don the mask and don the next few movies. But in 6, people outcried that they wanted Jason back, so they It's just a really stupid way they revived them, and it felt like the writing was very poor. And honestly, I don't remember Seven. I'm gonna search up Seven right now. Hold on. Friday the 13th. Seven. What was Seven again? New Blood. Oh, that's when he fights Carrie. Or, like, the girl that can control stuff of his mind. Yeah, that one was interesting. They basically wanted to that was when they were trying to make the Jason versus Freddy movie, but it was going through production hell, so they made a Jason versus Carrie movie without using Carrie, which was an odd movie as well. Hey, this is actually Ben, and I know you're probably wondering why the audio cut out when we were talking just the ending about Friday the 13th, but I'm actually recording this a day after I recorded this podcast yesterday. And I spend about 5 more minutes in this podcast talking about horror movies, Evil Dead, Shining, and stuff like that. But when I recorded this, it was late at night, and I was really tired, and I was only able to spend 5 or 6 minutes where I covered about 4 movies, and it just wasn't the best or what I wanted to elaborate about these movies. So because of all the spare time in quarantine, I'm probably gonna release another podcast again this month, and that will make up for the missed episode last month. Even though I did the live stream, I still want to do another podcast this month. So I know this one is a little bit shorter, but I think that's okay. And I think that the first 2 segments about Tiger King in theaters is really interesting. And the first few movies I talk about horror, and this one is great. So I think we're going to pick up this discussion in the next podcast and talk a little bit about more movies, and I might prepare some more interesting facts and thoughts on these horror movies and do a whole in-depth thing where I'm actually not sleepy and not tired. You can probably tell from the recording from yesterday to now even. I was a little sleepy when I was recording this one. So I'd like to thank you again for watching another episode of Based on Actual Events, and stay inside and stay safe in these trying times, and watch a movie with your friends and family in the safety of your own home. Thank you very much.